The Pittsburgh Steelers lost 13-10 to the Cleveland Browns, and there was lots of frustration abound from the Steelers players when our guys spoke to them after the game. Big question. Has Mike Tomlin lost the Steelers locker room? We'll answer that question and get into many more points from the Steelers loss and how they pick things up and move forward. It's Chris Carter here in the North Shore Drive podcast, joined by Ray Fittipaldo. It's going to be a fun one. Let's get into it.
You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter.
Hello and welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter. As always, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. You can find all of our written work at post-gazette.com for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Subscribe to get all of our written content there. And you can find this show as well as all of our video and audio content at Post-Gazette Sports, whether on YouTube or on your favorite podcasting app. A reminder, this show is brought to you by Mike's Beer Bar, the best bar in all of Pittsburgh. If you go down to the North Shore, there's no better place to visit than Mike's Beer Bar. When you go into Mike's Beer Bar, over 20 televisions to see whatever sporting events you want, and over 500 different available beers, 300 of those beers available on tap. 80 of those beers are local, 80 of those beers are available on tap, and they have some amazing food options available. We'll get to more into that later. As I said, we're joined by Ray Fittipaldo, who was there on hand for the Steelers' loss to the Cleveland Browns. Ray, we'll get more into the specifics of the game in a minute here, but there was a lot of people looking at some of the videos y'all were providing from the Steelers, the Browns away locker room with the Steelers in it after the game, of frustrated players, and especially a frustrated Najee Harris, who said he was tired of this bleep, who said, he kind of hesitated when asked if the defenses are seeing where they're coming from, and he said some of the times, and he admitted that. I think that's the first time he has admitted something like that, and it just seems like there is a frustration or an exhaustion point for the Steelers playmakers about what is really wrong with the Steelers offense, and Mike Tomlin doesn't address it in his post-game presser. Now, granted, Mike Tomlin addressing it to us isn't what's going to fix anything. They have to address it in-house. But do you get the sense that there is a boiling point coming for the Steelers if the offense doesn't show any progress?
I do. And, if Mike Tomlin hasn't already lost the locker room, it feels like it's coming, Chris. I mean, Najee Harris is a former team captain. Yeah. So for him to speak out yesterday the way he did was calculated. This wasn't 2 minutes after the game ended, Chris. I mean, there's a 15-minute cooling off period.
Yeah.
And I could tell you Najee Harris, we spoke to him probably 15 minutes into the locker room. We talked to a lot of other players before we got to Najee, and he was one of the last guys we interviewed. So he had 30 minutes or so to think about what he wanted to say, and there's no doubt. There is no doubt that he is fed up with this offense. And, really, Chris, you read into those comments, he's kind of fed up with Mike Tomlin's approach to winning games. I mean, his quote about us winning the way we did isn't going to get us anywhere. So now not only are you criticizing the OC, which other players have done or seemingly done, like Chuks Okorafor, who's on the bench now, but now we're getting to the point where the head coach is being called into question by one of his former team captains and still a leader within that locker room. So, yeah, we are to a boiling point now. I wouldn't be surprised at anything that happened this week, Chris. Nothing is off the table after that performance and after what Najee said.
Yeah, I look at that, and I do think that Najee Harris said what a lot of fans have been asking is like, is this sustainable? And I think everyone kind of agrees who studies the Steelers, and I've even said it's sustainable for now, but eventually the offense has to pick it up. But if the offense does pick it up, they're in a position to win more football games and against better opponents. And like right now, like you look at playoff predictors and things like that, people are still saying the Steelers have a good chance to make the playoffs because of the teams that are left on their schedule, because of what other teams have to face, and they're still 6-4 with the chance to win several of their games. And then again, this was a coin flip of a game. It went down to the wire. If Kenny Pickett hits an open man at the end of the game when he has Deontay Johnson in the red zone being uncovered, he walks into the end zone, the Steelers probably win this game going away. But when you look at the problems right now, if the Steelers offense does not take steps forward, it's going to continue to kind of push back against the patience that they've shown here. And look, Najee Harris all season long had been the quiet soldier. He was not voted to be captain. Kept it quiet about that. Obviously was very frustrated with it when we asked him about it. You can see he was kind of like holding it in. And then from there, you saw him when the offense was struggling. He was the one saying, we got to get the team together. He was the one pushing and saying, we got to get the offensive line to work with the running backs. And as much as Jaylen Warren is the best part of the rushing offense right now, other than the offensive line blocking it at the right point sometimes, Najee Harris deserves credit for at least being a leader to say, hey, let's get this together. And as a tandem, as a group between the running backs and the offensive line, that rushing offense just ran for over 170 yards. They're the first team to do that to the Cleveland Browns this season. And that's a defense that was fully healthy, fully loaded, ready to go. And they still won in the trenches there when it came to moving the ball in that way. And for them to do all that with the problems they have on the offensive line, for the youth there, and the passing game still not come to fruition, that to me says they are like they're saying we are doing our jobs. Somebody has to be accountable for what's not happening in the passing game. And to me, it sounds like Mike Tomlin, either won't go after Kenny Pickett in the private meetings unless he does and we're not seeing it, or B, it's about Matt Canada, or C, it's just the point is like, hey, everyone gets held to the standard of you got to be better. Presley Harvin gets talked about, the defense gets talked about, the offensive line gets talked about. But in Mike Tomlin's time, and this goes back to the Ben Roethlisberger, I can't recall a time, and Ray, you can correct me if I'm wrong here. I can't recall a time Mike Tomlin ever sat on the podium and said, Ben Roethlisberger needs to be better, because he often backed up his quarterback. And that worked with Ben Roethlisberger, right? Because even when Ben Roethlisberger had a 5-interception game, he'd come back with a 5-touchdown game eventually, and Mike Tomlin would be like, you see why I don't come after him? He's been doing the same approach for Kenny Pickett, but Kenny Pickett doesn't have a 3-touchdown game. And I think that's where things are boiling over, is that he is being very patient with a quarterback who's not delivering. And the more times he doesn't deliver, the more that patience looks more like stubbornness.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, what's the end game here with Kenny Pickett? I mean, they can bring off anyone with any kind of college experience off the street to run the offense that they're running now. You're either handing it off, or you're making one read and you're getting rid of the ball, you're checking it down. I mean, it's so elementary what they're doing. Either Kenny Pickett is incapable of running an NFL offense, or they've dumbed it down so much that they're just asking him to be an extremely conservative game manager here. So whatever the end game is, as Najee Harris said, it's not going to get them anywhere in the end. To your point, Chris, despite that loss, they're still 70%. Yeah. Their playoff chances are at 70% this morning, according to the New York Times postseason simulator. The odds went up.
Crazy.
Granted, because Chargers lost, Jets lost, all that stuff. But that's not my point. The point is, when they get to the playoffs, you're going to get your doors blown off by a good football team on the road. That's unquestioned. It's going to happen if nothing changes. So Najee Harris said it, like you said at the top, Chris. Everyone who watches this team, who has an idea of football, knew that was the case. And now we'll see if Mike Tomlin does anything about it.
I think it's something that needs to be done about it. Let's talk more specifically about the offense and what has to be better there, because we can talk about hyperbole as much as we want, but we have to look into this game and see what went wrong. We'll get to those points here on the North Shore Drive podcast for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette momentarily. But first, I want to remind you this show is brought to you by Mike's Beer Bar, the best bar in all of Pittsburgh. When you go to the North Shore, go to Federal Street, right across the street from PNC Park. You can find Mike's Beer Bar. They also are attached to the North Shore Tavern, all owned by the same people, but they're both great options. Mike's Beer Bar is the place you got to go to if you want to catch a sporting event in Pittsburgh. 20 televisions, so you can watch whatever you want, and they can flip to literally anything, especially with college basketball, hockey, here in the bowl season coming up in college football. There's so many opportunities to catch games there, as well as Premier League action and things like that. And when you go there, Mike's Beer Bar has over 500 different available beers. 300 of those beers are from the local Pittsburgh area, and 80 of those local beers are available on tap. You can also get a flight to try out whatever option you can even dream of, and trust me, you won't run out of favorites, because I never do, and I'm always there. Try their steak on a stone. for an awesome meal where you get your choice cut of steak brought to you on a heated stone. With every piece that you cut off, you press it into that stone, and you can choose how well done you want each piece of steak. It's an amazing thing to have while you're trying out all the best beers that Western Pennsylvania has to offer. Come to Mike's Beer Bar to get your sports fix and experience the best bar in Pittsburgh. And when you get there, tell them Chris sent you. We're back here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo breaking down the Steelers' loss to the Browns and where they go from here. Ray, we talked about the potential of losing the locker room from Mike Tomlin. Let's talk about the offense, though, that got this to this point. Because, again, the rushing offense, I wasn't so sure that they were going to be able to do this. They got 200 yards against the Packers, but I'm like, man, that Browns defense, they're physical, they're tough, they bring it at you. They're going to focus on taking the run away because they know Kenny Pickett isn't going to throw for big plays. And yet the rushing offense still got over 170 yards on the ground, and were able to move the ball there. That's the most rushing yards the Browns have allowed all season. And I think that there's something to be said about there's something to build upon there for the run game. Now, granted, the pass protection wasn't great, but I think guys like Broderick Jones, guys like James Daniels, heck, we even saw Mason Cole delivering good blocks downfield to help spring Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris for some of the bigger runs that they had in this game. And, of course, there was the 74-yard touchdown run, which I think is the longest touchdown run the Steelers have had since like 2011 or something like that. It's been a while, but I think you can see that the run game is building itself up, but the pass game, it can't take advantage of what the run game is creating. And that, I think, is where the Steelers' biggest problem is right now.
Yeah, Chris, 106 yards, which was a season low for Kenny Pickett. I believe a career low as well. The receivers, it was only a month ago, Chris, that George Pickens had back-to-back 100-yard receiving games. Now in the past 4 games, he's got 104 yards total. So, like we talk about the steps being taken forward with the running game. Just because that happens doesn't mean you have to go backward in the passing game, which is what Mike Tomlin intimated after the game yesterday. He was asked about Kenny Pickett in the passing game. He basically said maybe that's because we're running the ball so well. Well, that flies in the face of what everyone knows about football. If your running game is good, your passing game should benefit from that. You should be able to do play action off of it. They're going to have backers and safeties coming up to help in the run game. So, listen, sometimes Mike says stuff that only he believes after the game, and I think that was the case yesterday. He was just being extremely stubborn, with his approach to coaching this football team. But, my God, Kenny Pickett didn't break the 100-yard mark until that final pass of the game, the failed hook and lateral that was never lateraled, or lateral twice, I should say.
Yeah.
So, until the passing game is fixed, this team's not going anywhere. And I know they have a 70% chance of making the playoffs right now, but I'm telling you, if they don't fix it and fix it fast, they won't even get to the playoffs. They'll lose to the Cardinals. They'll lose to the Bengals. They'll lose to the Patriots and to the Colts if this type of stuff is allowed to go on in the coming weeks.
No, I listen, I agree. And again, you and I aren't talking about Kenny Pickett doing something amazing here. We're not talking about him turning into Joe Burrow or Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes. We're talking about just taking the simple things that are there. And we still haven't seen the All-22. And I wasn't there to see it from the press box like you were, Ray. But just from some of the angles they provide on the broadcast, there were open guys. Like again, on that red zone drive where the running game has pushed them down the field. They get inside the red zone. Kenny Pickett drops back. Deontay Johnson is uncovered over the middle. If he just right in front of him slant, if he hits him, it's literally a 5-yard pass that could turn into a touchdown because literally the Browns vacated the middle part of the field and left him there. It was a huge miscommunication on their part, and he never even saw it. He ends up taking a sack on that play, which if he at least throws the ball away, even if it's an incomplete pass, it gives them a third and manageable instead of a 3rd and 15 that led to them just checking it down, trying to get closer and get that. If they can't hit those type of plays, this passing offense can't do anything. Even on the last drive of the game, the first play, you have Deontay Johnson. It's a simple, quick 5-yard out. It's uncovered. It's a simple hey, you can do that in practice. And Kenny Pickett misses it. And it's like, you can't perform basic offense if you can't hit plays like that. The very next play, Jalen Warren goes in and Pat Fryman is there. Both of them release. They're open underneath because the Steelers have ran all deep routes, so the Browns have backed off. And you can even see after the play, Pat Fryman puts his hands up because the ball's thrown to nobody 40 yards downfield. And he's just like, what are we doing here? And to me, it screams time and time again, Kenny Pickett isn't making the simple reads in this offense. And you talked about simplicity in the offense. I agree. It has been dumbed down, but it's been dumbed down because Kenny Pickett can't do the simple things. And that's where it comes down to. You need somebody to do that. I know a lot of fans are saying, give Mason Rudolph a chance, give Mitch Trubisky a chance. And frankly, normally I would say, hey, you got to let the young quarterback work. But when Kenny Pickett can't do these basic things, when this isn't complicated, he has a guy right in front of him. That is the issue right now. And if you can't do the basic things, you can't get to some set level of great play calling. But you can't build upon that any further. And eventually, you saw when the Browns, like everyone's talking about why the Steelers didn't run the ball more late. And I agree they could have tried a few different things to run the ball there. You saw, and once the fourth quarter hit, the Browns were like, "You're not running on us. We're going to take that away. You're going to have to throw on us." And so the Steelers had the opportunities, but they weren't taken there. And that's where the Steelers, there has to be some accountability for the quarterback position and not being able to take what's right in front of you in this passing game. And that's what I think everybody is seeing. It's not executing the basics from the passing game.
Yeah, I mean, Kenny did something on that final drive that he should have been doing much earlier in the game. That deep shot to Deontay, where there was a miscommunication and Deontay broke it off. They should have tried to back off the Browns for the first three quarters. You don't do that on the last drive of the football game. The last drive of the football game, Chris, you need 30, 35 yards for a last-second field goal attempt. At the very worst, Chris, you're playing a conservative there. You're calling safe passing plays, and the quarterback has to know how to execute these safe passing plays, and then you're trying to either kick a last-second field goal or you're playing for overtime. You're not throwing three straight incomplete passes and giving the Browns the ball back, after running off, I don't know what it was, 15 or 20 seconds. I mean, the Steelers coaches, there's no way that's the way they drew it up. So, I mean, I'm criticizing the Steelers coaches for it because they haven't coached Kenny Pickett well enough. But those last two plays on that last offensive series, those weren't high percentage passes. And when he let it go, those were low percentage passes. Now, he probably had other options that were better.
That's where I'm at. They were low percentage, but especially on second down, you had two guys that were just like waving their hands. I'm open. And we could talk about primary receivers and things like a quarterback has to be able to see wide open guys, especially in the middle of the field, 2 yards in front of them. And that's where I think they can't. That there has to be people that say, "All right, that is on Kenny Pickett."
Yeah, it's got to be. It's got to be short control passing game there, make the Browns defend, or Chris, and listen, I believe this with all my heart. You needed to mix in some runs there on that last offensive series if you were going to go down. And once that first pass fell incomplete, they needed to do a screen or they needed to run just to get some time off the clock there, force the Browns to call a timeout, do something. Because what they did there with three straight incomplete passes was just losing football. And that's why I put this game on Mike Tomlin more than anything. Kenny Pickett right up there with him. But to me, this game was 100% on Mike Tomlin and how he coached that game in the final 2 minutes.
I mean, again, hit the open guys. I don't know how else you can coach a game to say other than hit the open receiver when we draw them up. And listen, I think that Mike Tomlin deserves a lot of blame for not putting the pressure on Kenny Pickett to execute in those moments. And I've said all season long, I think the teaching is the biggest problem for the Steelers right now because Kenny Pickett isn't seeing these open guys. But multiple times late in the game, in the fourth quarter, right when the Steelers have won a lot of these games, they got him open looks, simple ones over the middle. And again, not NFL open where if he throws it in the right angle in the right time, it'd be a great throw that would move the chains. But we're talking about wide open guys with nobody around that aren't getting the football. And I think Mike Tomlin deserves a lot of blame for not setting up for not teaching, getting this offense to be on the page to be able to take those plays. But in those moments on the field, if a quarterback can't execute there, that's where the problem is. And this is where I think it ultimately comes down to, as you and I are pointing out. If nothing is done after this, if Kenny Pickett isn't benched, or if the offense, if there's no changes on the offense, there's no pressure put on anybody, it will just continue to be the same. And that's where something has to change for the Steelers offense, because again, the running game's working. They're calling the right plays there, and they're taking what's advantage there. If the passing game just, again, takes what's right in front of them, takes what's drawn up in the design of the plays. I know a lot of people want to talk about Matt Canada's play design. Matt Canada's play designs are getting open guys. If Kenny Pickett doesn't throw the ball to the open man right in front of him, there's nowhere that anyone can go with the offense. And that's where I'm getting to the point where, again, I'd say calm down with the Trubisky and Rudolph talk, but it's very hard to deny that you at least get something from them in those situations, or you need to at least see if someone can give you something in those situations. Because again, not asking for anything difficult here. Just hit the guy 2 yards in front of you. And if you can't do that, you're not going anywhere.
Well, how difficult is it, Chris? I mean, the OC is in Kenny's ear until 15 seconds before the snap. I mean, The communication that, hey, Pat is going to block here. He's going to block air for 2 seconds. And then he's going to leak out. He's going to be open. Like you said, that's the coaching point there.
Yep.
Don't throw the ball 20 yards down the field in a deep shot to stop the clock. So, I mean, I'm right there with you, Chris. I mean, they can change the quarterback tomorrow. Mike Tomlin can come out and say that it is Tuesday news conference. That would probably be well-deserved. Kenny Pickett has not played well. But to your point, the coaching, the details of what to do in that situation at the end, to me, it's just inexcusable. And
I agree there. If you can't get them to simply take what's in front of them, they're not going to go anywhere. I want to talk about the defense with Ray, because they did give up a game-winning drive at the end of the game. But I think they also showed a lot of things that could be really good down the stretch here if they can just get some help from the offense moving forward. We'll talk about that here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter and Ray Fittipaldo. But first, a reminder: we're sponsored by our great sponsors at Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. They're mesothelioma and asbestos lawyers with over 85 years of experience. Call them now for a free consultation. That's Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. We're also brought to you by GameTime.co. Where buying tickets for your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. GameTime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all your sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. If you've ever had to buy tickets for an event but weren't comfortable with how much you were paying, that's where Game Time comes in, because you can see the view from your seat right there in the Game Time app. And you download the Game Time app to your phone. It allows you to see all those angles. You can also see all the different prices, and they have the best price guarantee that can't be beat. Even if you're running behind on an event, you can still get discounted tickets on Game Time better than anywhere else. And Game Time promises you, if you find tickets for a better price in the same section and row for less somewhere else, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code PITTPIT for $20 off your first purchase. Or go to their website, GameTime.co. Terms and conditions apply. Create an account and redeem code PITTPIT for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Back here on the North Shore Drive podcast, I'm your host Chris Carter here with Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, let's break some things down on this defense. This group did give up a game-winning field goal drive at the end of the game, but I also felt like that was after several drives of continuing to get stop after stop after stop after turnover after stop. And even when the Browns got back-to-back drives in Steelers territory, the defense got an interception. They literally moved the Browns back out of Steelers territory, and they found a way to keep the Steelers offense within reach in this entire game up until the last minute where they gave up the field goal drive there. I felt like the run defense, that was one of the best. That's one of the best showings that anyone's put up against the Browns run game all this year. They kept them contained. As much as people are going to look at Dorian Thompson-Robinson and think he did great, he had a worse passer rating than Kenny Pickett. I didn't have as much problems with the defense. There were some miscommunications early on, and I think that at the end of the game, they might have been gassed or something there, and they gave up a few plays here and there. But to me, at the end of the day, if you give up 13 points in the game, you should win it every single time. I have a hard time pinning much on the defense right now. And there's certain things you can point at specific why they can clean up, but that's not a losing performance from a defense.
No, I mean, Chris, can you blame them if they were tired on the final drive? I mean, they had 14 seconds of rest. I mean, the offense basically, I mean, they went down, sat on the bench, looked at the Microsoft tablets, and we got to go back out there. I mean, I mean, what do you want them to do? They played 75 snaps.
75
snaps. And Landon Roberts, who was 29, played 100% of the snaps. Patrick Peterson, who's 33, 100% of the snaps. Hayward was on a pitch count yesterday. It's clear that he's nowhere near where he was pre-injury. I mean, Cam Hayward, for all we know, hasn't been right since the end of last season because he wasn't doing anything in training camp. To me, it looked like he was basically playing on third down passing situations. He wasn't even in there a lot of the time on first and second down. So they're old. That's not a secret. But to your point, I thought they played well enough to win the game. Yeah. Would you like to see them bow up and stop them one more time? Yeah, but I can't blame them. I mean, to me, the defense in that football game was well down the list on their problems. And the first 15 or 20 things on that list, Chris, had everything to do with the offense.
I agree. I mean, Keanu Benton looks strong. I think he's a big factor in what they're doing right against the run. Landon Roberts was everywhere. I mean, I didn't know what more that man could do. He was on the outside on the left, on the outside on the right, up the middle stuff in the run, led the team with 15 tackles. He was looking like the linebacker that they've needed for the past few years with the way that he was playing. And I think he was bragging in the locker room, not bragging, but he was talking in the locker room about saying like y'all said I couldn't cover nobody and they wasn't getting nothing on me today. Now, granted, I think against a better passing offense, there might be some more challenges there, but certainly he got it. You can't say anything about it. His effort. I thought, heck, the safeties did as good of a job you could ask for with all these guys. Miles Killebrew had to be in the game because at one point Trenton Thompson was getting hurt. And I'm like, Ray, I thought you and Jerry was going to have to play safety at one point for the Steelers with the way that things were going. And to me, I was like, with all those guys, they only gave up one touchdown drive, and I still haven't seen the ball cross the plane on that one touchdown drive that the Browns had. But all those drives, I think that if anything, we saw better run defense on the Steelers. I think the pass rush can be a little bit better. There was times that I think that they were vanilla in what they were doing, maybe because they had so many new guys in off the ball, whether it came to Michael Walker, or Trenton Thompson, or Miles Killebrew, and all those guys. But I feel like if they can play this kind of defense, keep teams in this kind of range, and the offense just does the basic things moving forward, this team can beat most of the teams left on its schedule, because especially a lot of the teams that are on its schedule, they've either already beaten or or they're not looking good right now. And that's where I'm at, is that the defense, I think, is one of the defense and the run game are the most encouraging things about the Steelers moving forward in the AFC North.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, how many times are you going to run the ball for 172 yards, be a +1 in the turnover margin, and then lose a football game? I mean, that's hard to do.
It's hard.
I mean, the Steelers are now +11 in turnover margin, which is either number 1 in the NFL or close to it, and they're 6-4. They're barely above 500. So they're doing a lot of things right on defense, forcing turnovers. The run defense, I think, was better. I think it's obvious. The interior pass rush with Cam Hayward not being 100% is hurting them, and it's hurting T.J. Watt and Alex Highsmith too, because you're not pushing the pocket and you're not generating that kind of pressure that we've seen from that unit in past years. But in the grand scheme of things, if you hold the Cleveland Browns to 13 points or any other team to 13, 16, 19 points, this is the NFL. You should have a competent enough offense to win you those types of football games. And right now, most weeks, the Steelers don't have a competent offense.
Yeah, I agree. And that's a big problem. And again, we've been saying for weeks that, like, hey, they're doing enough here and enough there to win some of these games. And they won 4 out of their last 5 heading into this game by doing that. But eventually, that is not going to get it done if they don't take steps forward. Again, the run game's taking steps forward. They had 200 yards last week. They had 170 plus yards this week. And you look at that, those are the 2 best rushing performances of the season right now by far. And in fact, the week before that, they had 166 yards. There's 3 straight weeks they have run the ball for more than 150 yards against opponents. And that to me is a sign that group is moving forward. But you look at that in that span, the most the passing offense has gotten off of that is 160 yards in those 3 games. That has to change. If that does not change, if that does not improve, the Steelers are going nowhere. Now, again, I will say I think that some of the matchups may favor them a little bit better moving forward. The Browns defense may be the best defense that they play for the rest of the season, because the Bengals defense, they're okay, but they don't do what the Browns do. The Cardinals, the Patriots, the Colts, the Bengals again, the Seahawks, all those are defenses that I think could give the Steelers more space to work with there. And if the offense can just figure out some basic passing attack, some basic execution in the passing game, it can make the running offense that much more dangerous, because now then you'd be talking about there'd be a run game and you actually have to worry about Kenny Pickett or whoever plays quarterback, because I'm not so sure that his job is safe right now of just hitting those plays. And if you do that and you have 170 plus yards on the ground and your defense is playing that way, you can beat most of your opponents down the stretch and be a double-digit win team and make the playoffs. But then the question is, like you said, if they get to the playoffs, can they compete with other teams other teams that are in the playoffs in the NFL? They've already beaten one team that'll be in the playoffs, and that's the Baltimore Ravens. And heck, they beat the Browns earlier this season, but they have to be able to show ways to make progress from how they won those games, because they can't keep winning them the same way that they have all year. And that was Najee Harris's very point after the game.
Yeah, Chris, week 12, let's see if they can turn it around. I have my doubts. This is a big week for Mike Tomlin. This is a big week for Matt Canada if he's still calling the plays. To me, when you're on the verge of losing the locker room the way they are right now, this is an important football game for the Steelers. They cannot go to Cincinnati and lose to a backup quarterback again, or things are really going to fall apart. So I don't think I'm overestimating it. I think this is the biggest football game of the season. If it goes well, if they win, we'll be back on track to some extent, but I kind of want to see how the offense progresses. Kind of want to see if he makes any changes this week. Chris, at this point, what other changes can you make? You've already brought Eric Jones. You've already brought Matt Canada down from the sidelines. The only other change you could make is, one, change the quarterback, or two, change the OC, and they're not going to change the OC at this stage of the season.
Yeah, I think at this point, the offense is what it is, and it's not like they have a Joe Brady waiting in the wings to take over at that spot, unless, was it Glenn Thomas is the guy that they hired this past offseason, unless he somehow is miraculously the guy, and I don't think he is.
He's a quality control guy. Chris, I mean, he's a quality control guy. I'm not sure where that narrative came from. If they were going to make a change, it would be, the running backs coach or the offensive line coach stepping into that role. But you're right. It's not going to happen, because they don't have another play caller on that staff other than Mike Sullivan. And it's clear they had a chance to elevate Mike Sullivan in the last 2 years. They didn't do it. So it's clear they're married to Matt Canada for the rest of the season. And we'll see if it costs them. I don't know. Looking like it might cost them now.
We'll see if it does. As Ray said, this next game is extremely pivotal for the Steelers. I don't think it's a must win, because I think they have enough winnable games left in their schedule after that. But if they win that game, they'd have 7 wins going into their last 6 contests, I believe. And that would give them a chance to just go 500 the rest of the way, still get to double digits, and that would put them in a strong position to at least make the playoffs this year and show some signs moving forward. And if they could do that, that could fix a lot of the problems. But big question that we asked at the top: has Mike Tomlin lost the locker room? We'll be in the locker room this week at Ray, Brian, Jerry, myself, just to see where the Steelers are at and if there's any sense of confidence building in that locker room that moving into that game against the Bengals. We'll have all our coverage all week long here for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Subscribe at post-gazette.com to get all of that coverage on our written work. And as far as our podcast, get it on your favorite podcasting app and on YouTube. Remember, every day there's content released from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And then every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and the day before the Steelers game, we have the Acrisure Fan Advantage talking to an opponent expert about the upcoming game and how that's going to look. And this Wednesday, we will have Trey Essex, former Steelers offensive lineman who's been on the show before, give us what he thinks is the biggest problems on offense, as a guy who played with Ben Roethlisberger, played under Mike Tomlin, and has seen the Steelers offense take steps forward and backwards over the years. All that and more will be here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Stick with us all week long. We'll have you right here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.